First Things, episode number 38.
I seem to be lost.
And so you're working around the clock so you don't take time for yourself to feel like an actual human being.
I used to feel like no matter how hard I worked, I was just spinning my wheels.
Trying to be perfect, we try to have everything in place at one point in time, and you can't.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to First Things, the podcast dedicated to practical productivity based on modern research. My name is Brandon Vaughn, and my goal is to help you apply productive solutions to your life to help you live with less stress, greater passion, and amazing results. So glad to have you back with us today as we are in Chapter 8 of the Assertiveness Workbook, and today we are talking about being present, giving your opinion. Last week, we talked about body language and nonverbal communication with Vanessa Van Edwards, and many of you reached out to me and told me how much that show meant to you, as well as giving me some extra resources around that material. Some of you mentioned how hard this is because there's a lot of things when you really start analyzing your body language, your nonverbal communication, there's a lot of stuff that we get into habits of doing, and it can be a little overwhelming. And I want to encourage you, what Vanessa said last week, is to pick your battles and to go after one thing at a time. So maybe go after your voice inflection. See if you're doing the question inflection, where everything you say is ending with a question, and every time you talk, you always raise your voice at the end because it sounds like you don't know what you're talking about. Or what do you do with your hands? And just focus on that. So don't worry about if you're slouching or if you're crossing your legs or where your feet are pointed, or maybe just focus on how you do your hands, or focus on your facial expressions, or focus on your voice inflection, or something like that. You want to start off small, and you want to go after things that you can actually win at, things that you can perfect and work on. And video, again, is a great way to do this, although many of us may not want to do that because it's a little alarming, I think, for some of us to see ourselves on video. It's the same thing as when we hear our voice. Many times, because of the way our voice resonates within our skulls, we hear ourselves completely different than the way we sound through a recorder. And many times we don't like the way that we sound because we sound so much fuller and richer in our own heads. And then when we hear ourselves speak on a recording, we really detest that. And that could be more so through a video. But I definitely would encourage that you do this. And again, try not to think of correcting all of your body language or nonverbal thing at once. Just focus on one thing at a time. It could be that maybe a big area for you is eye contact. Are you really looking someone in the eyes when you talk to them? And I posted up a video last week of Vanessa talking about how we gaze differently at people. So if we're talking to someone that is a superior or a business contact versus someone that is more friendly to us, we typically gaze at them differently. We look at their eyes and their mouths differently. I would encourage you to go watch that video. But again, just start small, and I think that you will succeed in this, but be patient with this and realize it's very important. I think that at least 60% of our communication is nonverbal, maybe up to 90%. We really need to devote some time to this and really pay it some attention. And like I said last week, I want to come back to this issue at some point and really talk about this more in depth. Maybe do some more interviews with Vanessa and talk about this. Maybe go through her book or something like that. I just am really fascinated by this. And honestly, I think it's one area that I need work on in my own life. And I can look back as I've gone through some of Vanessa's training, and I can see how I have fixed a lot of areas in my life of how I would respond to people, how I might have had a tendency to look down and not really look at them. And I had to refocus myself to say, no, I need to look at them and be engaged with them. Now, Sarah mentioned on Facebook something that she's mentioned to me several times, and Sarah's a longtime listener of the show. She mentioned to me Amy Cuddy. Now, Amy is one of the persons that Vanessa quoted from last week. She's one of the persons that does a lot of research on this type of thing. In particular, the study that Vanessa talked about of how our body language can shape who we are. And this is a really great talk by Amy. And I want to actually play you this clip. It's about 15 minutes or so. But again, I think we need some more exposure to nonverbal communication and body language. So let's go ahead and listen to that right now, and then we're going to come back and get into Chapter 8.
So I want to start by offering you a free, no-tech life hack. And all it requires of you is this, that you change your posture for 2 minutes. But before I give it away, I want to ask you to right now do a little audit of your body and what you're doing with your body. So how many of you are sort of making yourselves smaller? Maybe you're hunching, crossing your legs, maybe wrapping your ankles. Sometimes we hold on to our arms like this. Sometimes we spread out. I see you. So I want you to pay attention to what you're doing right now. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes, and I'm hoping that if you sort of learn to tweak this a little bit, it could significantly change the way your life unfolds. So we're really fascinated with body language, and we're particularly interested in other people's body language. We're interested in, an awkward interaction, or a smile, or a contemptuous glance, or maybe a very awkward wink, or maybe even something like a handshake.
Here they are arriving at number 10, and look at this lucky policeman gets to shake hands with the President of the United States. Oh, and here comes the Prime Minister of the... No.
So a handshake, or the lack of a handshake, can have us talking for weeks and weeks and weeks, even the BBC and the New York Times. So obviously, when we think about nonverbal behavior or body language, but we call it nonverbals as social scientists, it's language. So we think about communication. When we think about communication, we think about interactions. So what is your body language communicating to me? What's mine communicating to you? And there's a lot of reason to believe that this is a valid way to look at this. So social scientists have spent a lot of time looking at the effects of our body language or other people's body language on judgments. And we make sweeping judgments and inferences from body language. And those judgments can predict really meaningful life outcomes, like who we hire or promote, who we ask out on a date. For example, Nalini Ambady, a researcher at Tufts University, shows that when people watch 30-second soundless clips of real physician-patient interactions, their judgments of the physician's niceness predict whether or not that physician will be sued. So it doesn't have to do so much with whether or not that physician was incompetent, but do we like that person and how they interacted? Even more dramatic, Alex Todorov at Princeton has shown us that judgments of political candidates' faces in just 1 second predict 70% of US Senate and gubernatorial race outcomes. And even, let's go digital, emoticons used well in online negotiations can lead you to claim more value from that negotiation. If you use them poorly, bad idea, right? So when we think of nonverbals, we think of how we judge others, how they judge us, and what the outcomes are. We tend to forget, though, the other audience that's influenced by our nonverbals, and that's ourselves. We are also influenced by our nonverbals, our thoughts and our feelings and our physiology. So what nonverbals am I talking about? I'm a social psychologist, I study prejudice, and I teach at a competitive business school. So it was inevitable that I would become interested in power dynamics. I became especially interested in nonverbal expressions of power and dominance. And what are nonverbal expressions of power and dominance? Well, this is what they are. So in the animal kingdom, they are about expanding. So you make yourself big, you stretch out, you take up space, you're basically opening up. It's about opening up. And this is true across the animal kingdom. It's not just limited to primates, and humans do the same thing. So they do this both when they have power sort of chronically, and also when they're feeling powerful in the moment. And this one is especially interesting because it really shows us how universal and old these expressions of power are. This expression, which is known as pride, Jessica Tracy has studied, she shows that people who are born with sight and people who are congenitally blind do this when they win at a physical competition. So when they cross the finish line and they've won, it doesn't matter if they've never seen anyone do it, they do this. So the arms up in the V, the chin is slightly lifted. What do we do when we feel powerless? We do exactly the opposite. We close up, we wrap ourselves up, we make ourselves small. We don't want to bump into the person next to us. So again, both animals and humans do the same thing. And this is what happens when you put together high and low power. So what we tend to do when it comes to power is that we complement the other's nonverbals. So if someone's being really powerful with us, we tend to make ourselves smaller. We don't mirror them, we do the opposite of them. So I'm watching this behavior in the classroom, and what do I notice? I notice that MBA students really exhibit the full range of power nonverbals. So you have people who are like caricatures of alphas, like really coming into the room. They get right into the middle of the room. before class even starts, like they really want to occupy space. When they sit down, they're sort of spread out, they raise their hands like this. You have other people who are virtually collapsing when they come in. As soon as they come in, you see it. You see it on their faces and their bodies, and they sit in their chair and they make themselves tiny, and they go like this when they raise their hand. I noticed a couple things about this. One, you're not going to be surprised, it seems to be related to gender. So, women are much more likely to do this kind of thing than men. Women feel chronically less powerful than men, so this is not surprising. But the other thing I noticed is that it also seemed to be related to the extent to which the students were participating and how well they were participating. And this is really important in the MBA classroom because participation counts for half the grade. So business schools have been struggling with this gender grade gap. You get these equally qualified women and men coming in, and then you get these differences in grades, and it seems to be partly attributable to participation. So I started to wonder, okay, so you have these people coming in like this, and they're participating. Is it possible that we could get people to fake it, and would it lead them to participate more? So my main collaborator, Dana Carney, who's at Berkeley, and I really wanted to know, can you fake it till you make it? Like, can you do this just for a little while and actually experience a behavioral outcome that makes you seem more powerful? So we know that our nonverbals govern how other people think and feel about us. There's a lot of evidence, but our question really was, do our nonverbals govern how we think and feel about ourselves? There's some evidence that they do. So, for example, when we smile when we feel happy, but also when we're forced to smile by holding a pen in our teeth like this, it makes us feel happy. So it goes both ways. When it comes to power, it also goes both ways. So when you feel powerful, you're more likely to do this, but it's also possible that when you pretend to be powerful, you are more likely to actually feel powerful. So the second question really was, so we know that our minds change our bodies, but is it also true that our bodies change our minds? And when I say minds, in the case of the powerful, what am I talking about? So I'm talking about thoughts and feelings and the sort of physiological things that make up our thoughts and feelings. And in my case, that's hormones. I look at hormones. So what do the minds of the powerful versus the powerless look like? So powerful people tend to be, not surprisingly, more assertive and more confident, more optimistic. They actually feel that they're going to win even at games of chance. They also tend to be able to think more abstractly. So there are a lot of differences. They take more risks. There are a lot of differences between powerful and powerless people. Physiologically, there also are differences on two key hormones, testosterone, which is the dominance hormone, and cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So what we find is that high-power alpha males in primate hierarchies have high testosterone and low cortisol. And powerful and effective leaders also have high testosterone and low cortisol. So what does that mean? When you think about power, people tended to think only about testosterone because that was about dominance. But really, power is also about how you react to stress. So do you want the high-power leader that's dominant, high on testosterone, but really stress reactive? Probably not, right? You want the person who's powerful and assertive and dominant, but not very stress reactive, the person who's laid back. So we know that in primate hierarchies, if an alpha needs to take over, if an individual needs to take over an alpha role sort of suddenly, within a few days, that individual's testosterone has gone up significantly and his cortisol has dropped significantly. So we have this evidence, both that the body can shape the mind, at least at the facial level, and also that role changes can shape the mind. So what happens, okay, you take a role change, what happens if you do that at a really minimal level, like this tiny manipulation, this tiny intervention? For 2 minutes you say, I want you to stand like this, and it's going to make you feel more powerful. So this is what we did. We decided to bring people into the lab and run a little experiment. And these people adopted for 2 minutes either high power poses or low power poses. And I'm just going to show you 5 of the poses, although they took on only 2. So here's one, couple more, This one has been dubbed the Wonder Woman by the media. Here are a couple more. So you can be standing or you can be sitting. And here are the low power poses. So you're folding up, you're making yourself small. This one is very low power. When you're touching your neck, you're really kind of protecting yourself. So this is what happens. They come in, they spit into a vial. We, for 2 minutes, say, you need to do this or this. They don't look at pictures of the poses. We don't want to prime them with the concept of power. We want them to be feeling power, right? So 2 minutes they do this. We then ask them, how powerful do you feel on a series of items? And then we give them an opportunity to gamble. And then we take another saliva sample. That's it. That's the whole experiment. So this is what we find. Risk tolerance, which is the gambling. What we find is that when you're in the high power pose condition, 86% of you will gamble. When you're in the low power pose condition, only 60%. And that's a pretty whopping significant difference. Here's what we find on testosterone. From their baseline when they come in, high power people experience about a 20% increase, and low power people experience about a 10% decrease. So again, 2 minutes and you get these changes. Here's what you get on cortisol. High power people experience about a 25% decrease, and the low power people experience about a 15% increase. So 2 minutes lead to these hormonal changes that configure your brain to basically be either assertive, confident, and comfortable, or really stress reactive, and feeling sort of shut down. And we've all had that feeling, right? So it seems that our nonverbals do govern how we think and feel about ourselves. So it's not just others, but it's also ourselves. Also, our bodies change our minds. But the next question, of course, is, can power posing for a few minutes really change your life in meaningful ways? So this is in the lab, it's this little task, it's just a couple of minutes. Where can you actually apply this, which we cared about, of course. And so we think it's really what matters, where you want to use this is evaluative situations, like social threat situations. Where are you being evaluated? Either by your friends, like for teenagers, it's at the lunchroom table. It could be, for some people, it's speaking at a school board meeting. It might be giving a pitch, or giving a talk like this, or doing a job interview. We decided that the one that most people could relate to, because most people had been through, was the job interview. So we published these findings, and the media are all over it, and they say, okay, so this is what you do when you go in for the job interview, right? So we were, of course, horrified and said, oh my God, no, that's not what we meant at all, for numerous reasons. No, don't do that. Again, this is not about you talking to other people, it's you talking to yourself. What do you do before you go into a job interview? You do this. Right? You're sitting down, you're looking at your iPhone or your Android, not trying to leave anyone out. You're looking at your notes, you're hunching up, making yourself small, when really what you should be doing maybe is this, like in the bathroom, right? Do that, find 2 minutes. So that's what we want to test, okay? So we bring people into a lab, and they do either high or low power poses again. They go through a very stressful job interview. It's 5 minutes long. They are being recorded, they're being judged also, and the judges are trained to give no nonverbal feedback. So they look like this. Like, imagine this is the person interviewing you. So for 5 minutes, nothing. And this is worse than being heckled. People hate this. It's what Marianne LaFrance calls standing in social quicksand. So this really spikes your cortisol. So this is the job interview we put them through, because we really wanted to see what happened. We then have these coders look at these tapes, 4 of them. They're blind to the hypothesis, they're blind to the conditions. They have no idea who's been posing in what pose. And they end up looking at these sets of tapes, and they say, oh, we want to hire these people, all the high power posers. We don't want to hire these people. We also evaluate these people much more positively overall. But what's driving it? It's not about the content of the speech. It's about the presence that they're bringing to the speech. We also, because we rate them on all these variables related to sort of competence, like how well structured is the speech? How good is it? What are their qualifications? No effect on those things. This is what's affected. These kinds of things. People are bringing their true selves, basically. They're bringing themselves. They bring their ideas, but as themselves, with no, residue over them. So this is what's driving the effect, or mediating the effect. So when I tell people about this, that our bodies change our minds, and our minds can change our behavior, and our behavior can change our outcomes, they say to me, it feels fake, right? So I said, fake it till you make it. Like, it's not me. Like, I don't want to get there and then still feel like a fraud. I don't want to feel like an imposter. I don't want to get there only to feel like I'm not supposed to be here. And that really resonated with me, because I want to tell you a little story about being an imposter and feeling like I'm not supposed to be here. When I was 19, I was in a really bad car accident. I was thrown out of a car, rolled several times. I was thrown from the car, and I woke up in a head injury rehab ward, and I had been withdrawn from college, and I learned that my IQ had dropped by 2 standard deviations, which was very traumatic. I knew my IQ because I had identified with being smart, and I had been called gifted as a child. So I'm taken out of college. I keep trying to go back. They say, you're not going to finish college. Like, just, there are other things for you to do, but that's not going to work out for you. So I really struggled with this. And I have to say, having your identity taken from you, your core identity, and for me it was being smart, having that taken from you, there's nothing that leaves you feeling more powerless than that. So I felt entirely powerless. I worked and worked and worked, and I got lucky and worked and got lucky and worked. Eventually, I graduated from college. It took me 4 years longer than my peers. And I convinced someone, my angel advisor, Susan Fisk, to take me on. And so I ended up at Princeton, and I was like, I am not supposed to be here. I am an imposter. And the night before my first year talk, and the first year talk at Princeton is a 20-minute talk to 20 people. That's it. I was so afraid of being found out the next day that I called her and said, I'm quitting. She was like, you are not quitting, because I took a gamble on you and you're staying. You're going to stay, and this is what you're going to do. You're going to fake it. You're going to do every talk that you ever get asked to do. You're just going to do it and do it and do it, even if you're terrified and just paralyzed and having an out-of-body experience, until you have this moment where you say, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. Like, I have become this. I am actually doing this. So that's what I did. 5 years in grad school. A few years, I'm at Northwestern. I moved to Harvard. I'm at Harvard. I'm not really thinking about it anymore, but for a long time I had been thinking, not supposed to be here, not supposed to be here. So at the end of my first year at Harvard, a student who had not talked in class the entire semester, who I had said, look, you got to participate or else you're going to fail, came into my office. I really didn't know her at all. And she came in totally defeated, and she said, I'm not supposed to be here. And that was the moment for me, because 2 things happened. One was that I realized, oh my gosh, I don't feel like that anymore. I don't feel that anymore, but she does, and I get that feeling. And the second was, she is supposed to be here. Like, she can fake it, she can become it. So I was like, yes, you are. You are supposed to be here, and tomorrow you're going to fake it, you're going to make yourself powerful, and, you're going to... and you're going to go into the classroom, and you are going to give the best comment ever, And she gave the best comment ever, and people turned around, and they were like, oh my God, I didn't even notice her sitting there, She comes back to me months later, and I realized that she had not just faked it till she made it, she had actually faked it till she became it. So she had changed. And so I want to say to you, don't fake it till you make it. Fake it till you become it. It's not do it enough until you actually become it and internalize. The last thing I want to leave you with is this. Tiny tweaks can lead to big changes. So this is 2 minutes. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Before you go into the next stressful, evaluative situation, for 2 minutes, try doing this in the elevator, in a bathroom stall, at your desk behind closed doors. That's what you want to do. Configure your brain to cope the best in that situation. Get your testosterone up. Get your cortisol down. Don't leave that situation feeling like, oh, I didn't show them who I am. Leave that situation feeling like, oh, I really feel like I got to say who I am and show who I am. So I want to ask you first, both to try power posing, and also I want to ask you to share this science, because this is simple. I don't have ego involved in this. Give it away. Share it with people, because the people who can use it the most are the ones with no resources and no technology and no status and no power. Give it to them, because they can do it in private. They need their bodies, privacy, and 2 minutes. and it can significantly change the outcomes of their life. Thank you.
Well, I hope you liked that. That was a very interesting talk and a lot of stuff to digest. I'm going to post a link to the video in my show notes, which will be at firstthingsproductivity.com/38. There's a link to that video. I would encourage you to go and watch the video again because you need to see it. You need to see some of the examples that she shows. She shows a lot of PowerPoint examples of different types of people and their posture. So some of that information that she gives will make a lot more sense if you actually watch the video. But I think you can get the basic elements of what she's saying just by listening to her talk. But again, take some time to really think about your body language, think about your nonverbal communication, and work on it. So giving your opinion, chapter 8, this is what the author says at the beginning of this chapter. He says, to be assertive is to participate in the events of your own life and the lives of others. Part of being there is being willing to reveal your attitudes, preferences, ideas, goals, and opinions. We can avoid being open about these things, but in the process, we avoid living our own lives. It may be difficult to think of all of the situations in which you could give your opinion. Perhaps you have been holding back so long that people no longer ask very often. Perhaps you give your opinion using such an aggressive style that they don't dare ask. But there are thousands of these situations. Here are just a few that he gives. Which restaurant do you want to go to tonight? What did you think of the movie? We need to decide on the kitchen repairs. What should we do first? I need your professional opinion on this. Where should we go on vacation? How should we handle our daughter's habit of stealing? What's your view on the death penalty? Let me tell you this joke about something like a racial type thing. Who are you going to vote for? Do you mind if I take this? We're thinking of firing James. What do you think? Here's a draft of the memo I'm writing. Any thoughts? Maybe we should get married. Your grading has to be done by Monday. So what do you think? Am I ready for an ocean dive? And these are how he opens up just by some of the questions that we could be faced in life to give our opinion. Fact is, we need to be able to give our opinion in a non-aggressive, non-manipulative way, to be able just to say, this is how I feel about things. Now, he gives an example, or he gives an exercise in his book to think of 3 situations in the last 3 days in which you could have offered your opinion. Maybe you did offer your opinion. Maybe you didn't and you held back. Maybe you gave your opinion in a very aggressive way in which no one felt like they could disagree with you. Or maybe you gave your opinion in a very sarcastic manner. So think about that. Can you think of 3 times in which you could have given your opinion but didn't? You gave your opinion. Maybe you gave your opinion very aggressively. Maybe you gave your opinion very sarcastically. And think about how you did that. Because if you're used to a passive style of communication, many times the way we deal with this is we just avoid giving our opinion. So someone asks us, did we like this dinner? And many times we will change the subject, or we will just lie and say yes, or something like that. Maybe we will wait for other people to give their opinion first so that they don't ever come back around and ask us our opinion. We hope they forget that they asked us what our opinion was. Many people will only give their opinion if they agree with the other people because they don't want to stand out, or they don't want to appear hostile, as if giving your opinion makes you hostile. That's kind of a deception, a stinking thinking that many passive style communicators make, is that just to give your opinion is a hostile thing, especially if it disagrees with other people that are in the room or people that are talking. And as such, people will lie, people will pretend to agree about something that they don't really agree about because they're afraid of the conflict. Now, aggressive style communicators are very willing to give their opinion. They have the opposite problem. There's many times that they would do well not to give their opinion. Because remember, what we're saying about assertiveness is it's on this continuum of nonverbal to verbal communication. And if you never give your opinion, that's not a good sign. But if you always give your opinion, that's not a good sign. And aggressive styles really bulldoze. It's what Vanessa mentioned last week. They are tanks. They come in and they just blow everybody away. And basically, when they give their opinion, they make other people feel very stupid if they disagree with them. How on earth could you ever think that? They could very much criticize them. They can make fun of them. They could pressure them. They could give them a weird look on their face that makes everyone very uncomfortable about that person and what they just said. Or they will bulldoze you to try to change your opinion. They'll do anything to make you see it their way. They will intimidate you. They will manipulate you. They will use sarcasm. They will raise their voice. They will fling their arms. They will do something to make you change your mind about this because they can't afford for you to disagree with them. Remember, that is an assertiveness, because assertiveness respects the fact that that person may disagree. You don't have to convince them. You don't have to make them change. But an aggressive style says, yes, you must see it my way, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to change your mind. Now, a passive-aggressive style, in terms of giving your opinion, will be very similar to the passive style of communication at first. You'll avoid disagreeing You won't strongly express how you feel about something. But when that person is away, then you will secretly do things to possibly hurt them or to undermine their efforts. So, for example, if your boss says something in a meeting that you really disagree with, instead of talking to your boss or mentioning that, a passive-aggressive approach would wait till after the meeting and get up to one of your coworkers and say, "Can you believe what they said in that meeting? That's just the most stupid thing I've ever heard." And that's more of a passive-aggressive approach to giving your opinion about something. Now, here's what the author says in the book about what assertiveness looks like in terms of giving your opinion. Let me read this for you. He says, "You are willing to express your opinion whether or not others have done so. You take ownership of your opinion, such as, my own view is blank, fill in the blank. So you take ownership of your opinion rather than presenting it as the only view a reasonable person would take. If someone disagrees, you are willing to discuss the issue, but you don't necessarily feel that your mission is to change their mind. You are willing to change your own mind if others provide new information that you hadn't considered, but you don't change your mind just because others think differently." And I think that's a very good definition of what an assertive approach to expressing your opinion is. You own your opinion. This is how I feel. You're not apologizing for it. You're not downgrading yourself. You're willing to listen to what other people have to say. You're even willing to potentially change your mind if someone presents you with evidence that may cause you to rethink it. And above all, you are not trying to manipulate others to see it your way. You may state why you feel that way in the hope that maybe they come along and agree with you. But if they don't, it's not the end of the world, and that's not the goal. So if you go into a situation with the goal that they must agree with you, then you're fighting the wrong battle. You go in there to say, I respect that you may disagree with me. This is how I feel, and I'm not going to apologize for it. It's how I feel. If you disagree with me, that is fine. Now, the author gives several suggestions for how we could put this into practice. And the first thing is to relax before you start, especially if you deal with passive or aggressive styles. It's a good thing just to take a deep breath before you start actually saying something. Now, for a passive style person, that breath is going to be a very nervous breath and mustering up the courage and the strength to actually say something out loud. For an aggressive style communicator, that breath is going to be one of trying to calm you down to not go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 1 second and bulldoze everyone in the room. Another suggestion is to rehearse what you're going to say. Now, this is a common recommendation throughout the book. We've mentioned it several times, and it's a very good idea to practice this stuff. If you are used to doing certain things, then practice it. And for a passive style communicator, you can simply record yourself again by video. You can stand in front of a mirror and practice this stuff. Definitely helps if you have somebody you can trust that you can practice with. For an aggressive style communicator, I would actually suggest that either you do videotape yourself, but more so, I would definitely recommend for that style that you get a partner that you can say, listen, people say that I'm very aggressive. I can see their point. I'm trying to be better about this. Can you help me and point out to me when I'm doing this? Call me on it right then. Or can I record myself and you watch it and give me your opinion of this? I think an aggressive style communicator is possibly a little bit more deceived in terms of their problems than maybe a passive style would be. Many passive people know they're passive, but aggressive style people don't always know they're aggressive. So if you've heard that from someone, then you may want to get somebody else that you trust in there to help you with that. I don't think an aggressive person standing in front of a mirror will do any good for this, unless you've really diagnosed and had somebody speak into your life and say, this is the area you need to work on. If you did this, you would be a lot better. Well, then take that and then go to a mirror. I think for a passive style communicator, you could go to a mirror and do this, but part of being a little bit more assertive is that you want to involve people. So again, I think having someone that you can practice with would go a long, long way. Another point that, wow, this is something I have to work on, and I still fall prey to this quite a bit, and that is signaling a lack of confidence. And the recommendation is don't do that. Don't signal a lack of confidence. Many times when we're giving our opinion, we will sometimes apologize for it, or we will downplay our own selves. So for instance, we could come across, the author mentions this, we could come across and say, when we give our opinion, I could be completely wrong about this, and you can tell me if I am, but I have sort of been thinking that, and then whatever. And see, what we're doing when we do that is we're undermining our opinion out of fear that others may disagree. And we're setting ourselves up for failure. We're setting ourselves up for rejection by basically saying, I know you're going to reject me because of this. I know you're going to think I'm stupid because of this. So I'm already going to put it out there on the table that you think this. I could be completely wrong. I know you guys will think I'm completely nuts when I say this. And then you give your opinion. we do that as a self-defense mechanism because we're afraid of rejection. We are afraid of ridicule. We are afraid of failure, and we don't need to do that. We need to be very strong about what we believe and say so. Again, we don't have to, and it goes back to the last few weeks of lessons on this. We feel like many times we have to justify ourselves too. Well, this is the reason why I feel this way. And you've got to really embrace, and again, I'm speaking to myself here, really embrace the fact that you don't have to justify yourself. Now, it's nice, especially for the people that you like and love, if you would let them into your brain and your thinking and your emotions about things, but you don't have to justify things. And many times we fear that so much that, again, we will undermine how we express our opinion. If we're undecided about something, it's okay just to say we're undecided. I don't know what to do, without saying, I'm such an idiot. I flip-flop all around. I just never know what to do. No, quit beating up on yourself. Quit giving away excuses. Quit planting in people's mind a failure mentality about yourself. Just say, I really don't know what to do about this situation. I just wanted you guys to know. And that's all you have to say. You don't have to say, I'm an idiot, or I'm so stupid and I do all this. You've got to quit this negative self-talk about yourself around other people. Quit trying to buffer your life around rejection. If people reject you, that's not the end of the world. It's quite okay that people reject you. We've got to come to a sense of our identity and worth that is apart from other people's opinion about ourselves. Another recommendation is feel free to signal your openness to other views. Basic idea here is that if your opinion is such that you're not sure about it, then it's okay to tell people that. Well, I don't really have a strong preference for this, but I would prefer this, or I would like this, but I don't really have a strong preference. You can signal to people that you're open to other views, you're open to suggestions, you're open to changes. Another recommendation is to own your message. Now, this is where we will start putting the blame on someone else. Now, I, again, have a really hard time with this one. And part of the reason why I have a hard time with this one is because also I'm a statistician, and that's my background. So I love research, and I love what research says. But I find myself many times, if I'm threatened in some situations, that instead of saying, I feel like this, I will say, well, research says that this is the case. And I will toss it over to some expert and blame it on them. So if somebody rejects me, well, you're not really rejecting me, you're rejecting them. You're rejecting this research. You're rejecting what so-and-so says. Well, so-and-so says that this is the case, and if you disagree with me, well, then you've got a bigger problem. That's my mentality that's going on in my brain. Now, if that isn't your view, if that isn't your opinion, then that's okay to do. If you say, well, research says this, but I don't think I really agree with that. I think that it could be different, but I don't know why I feel that way. You could say something like that. But if you're agreeing with the research, it's much better to own your own opinion and being very transparent about it. I feel like this is the case, and I've actually done some research, and it seems like the research backs me up on this. But even if that wasn't the case, I feel like this is true and this is what we need to do. Own your own opinion and don't push it off on someone else. And again, I just see that a lot in my own life. So for example, when I talk to people about meetings, I have to be very careful about that because I really detest most meetings. I've mentioned that to you many times on this show. I think most meetings are a waste of time. And I don't understand why we have so many meetings in some of these businesses. Well, if I'm not careful, if I'm talking to people about this for fear of what they may think about me, I may very well tell them, well, research shows that people are more productive if they don't meet all the time. And I'll say stuff like that instead of just saying, I just don't like meetings and I don't think that we're very productive with that. And oh, by the way, I've also read some research that tends to back me up on this. But instead of owning that message, then I will put it off for that fear of rejection. Another great tip is to not apologize for having an opinion. Many of us feel like we're wrong by having an opinion, and we have to ask people's permission or forgiveness, or we have to excuse it as if it's some disease that we have. Oh, excuse me, my opinion is showing right now, so you have to just forgive me for that. There's nothing wrong with having an opinion. So if you start off phrases like, well, I'm sorry for saying this, but, and then give your opinion, or forgive me for saying this, but, is basically saying that your point of view doesn't really matter and that you don't have a right to an opinion. So you're apologizing for it. Basically, when you're saying that, you're saying, I'm sorry, I'm not worthy to have an opinion on this, but I'm going to tell you what it is. I don't have a right to opinion. My opinion is stupid, and I'm going to apologize for it as I'm giving you my opinion. Another tip that may be a little bit more for the aggressive styles is to realize that you are not the source of all truth. You don't know everything. You aren't an expert on everything. And it's very refreshing to get around people that know they know certain things and also know that they have absolutely no clue about other things. It's very, very refreshing. That's one of the few things that I actually miss about a lot of the university interactions that I always had in the past. I've kind of cut down quite a bit on. It's because many people in the university, now there's some exceptions to this, but many people specialize in something. So they are an expert in this field, this particular niche, and they don't claim to be an expert in everything else. So if you go to them about that particular thing, you know they're going to rock it out. But if you go to them about something else that they don't focus on in their research, they'll quickly tell you, I am not the best person to talk about this. Why don't you go talk to Susan Smith down the hall, because she does a lot of research in this and she's the person you really want to talk to about that. And I love that mentality. Many times a person that has a very aggressive style of communication feels like they must know everything, and they cannot admit the fact that there are some things they don't know, or they can't admit that sometimes they make mistakes. So they're very willing to say statements like, well, any thinking person would agree that whatever. Anybody in their right mind would know that this is the way that it should be. They will express their opinion as if there's no other way to see that issue. And we must avoid doing that type of thing. Another thing for an aggressive style is we cannot intimidate people. And this goes back to some of our nonverbal communication styles, our voice inflection. We need to be very diligent not to raise our voice, not to tower over the person, not to stare at them and threaten them, or make a personal attack on them, or use guilt on them, or to one-up them, which was mentioned last week. Some people just love to always say, well, yes, but here's something better. They always have the better thing, or their idea is always better. And that's an intimidation tactic. And I've seen many people, these tank type people who go in and just blow everybody away, and they intimidate people to agree with them. The fact is, when people leave the room, they don't agree with you, and they're going to let other people know they don't agree with you, but they'll agree with you in the meeting just to get you to hush up. Very few people really change their mind through manipulation, guilt, or intimidation. Think about your own life. Do you like people manipulating you? Do you like people intimidating you, making you feel guilty for things? Does it make you do things? Well, sometimes yes, and that's not a good thing. But do you resent that if that happens? Sure. I don't know anyone who doesn't resent that type of thing or get angry with that thing. And the big question to ask is, did you really change your mind, or did you just give in out of fear of failure, rejection, or just to shut the other person up? People don't change their minds through intimidation. Another tip is to consider before justifying. Again, many of us feel guilty for having an opinion. Some of us feel threatened if people disagree with us, and we feel like we must change their mind at all costs. You must see it my way. It's funny that many people wouldn't phrase it like that, but that's how people respond when people disagree with them. They feel like they must convince the other person. They must change their mind. They must justify themselves and present all the facts. And as the author says, that usually comes from one of two beliefs. First, that to keep my opinion, the other person must share it. If they don't share it, then I have to change. Or the second thing is that the worth or validity of my opinion, or me as a person, depends on my ability to defend the position. And it leaves me in a state where I don't feel like I'm in control. Because if I feel like I must defend my position, and if the other person doesn't change their mind, then that means I've lost some sense of control. And the author mentioned several statements that basically show this type of mentality, a state where we don't feel like we have to justify ourselves. And I'll admit, this is an area that's sometimes hard for me. For instance, he says, I can see that you don't agree. Telling somebody that and just leaving it there. Not being aggressive, just very nicely saying, I can see that you don't agree with me, and that's okay. Or to say, sounds like you believe this, and I believe that. Or to say, no, I'm not going to argue the point. I was just simply saying how I feel. And the last tip for today is to sometimes let it slide. Now, again, we've talked about this again and again and again. The fact that assertiveness always falls on a continuum of nonverbal to verbal expressions of it. And there are many times when we don't need to give our opinion. In fact, it would probably be very beneficial if we don't always do that. I don't know what a good rule of thumb is. There's the 80-20 rule. I typically think maybe 50-50 or maybe 60% of the time where you don't give your opinion and 40% where you do is probably a good rule of thumb to live by. But I don't want to give a formula that people think too hard about this, because I think you should live your life in freedom and spontaneity and not be bogged down by rules and formulas. But I think that's a good kind of principle to live by. I think more often than half of the time, I should be less pressured to give my opinion about something, but slightly less than half the time I should. And I think that's a good balance for me personally. You may differ and may disagree with that. I don't really want to constantly be giving my opinion all of the time, because I don't really think it matters in most things. And to me, it's a waste of time to do that. There's much more important things to do in life. But I also don't want to swing the opposite way and never give my opinion about something. It's very much for me a matter of picking my battles. there are certain things in this life that are worth battling over, and there's a lot of things that just aren't worth the hassle. They're not worth battling over. And I see people all the time get so upset about certain things, and I'm thinking, why? Why are you so upset about this? Why do you have to prove yourself in this situation? It just doesn't make any sense for me. And something I know that many of you have heard before, to ask yourself, will this particular thing matter 100 years from now? Will it matter 50 years from now? Will it matter 10 years from now? Will it matter 6 months from now? And there's so many things in our lives that if we're really honest, we would have to say, this really doesn't matter. It won't matter 10 years from now. I won't even remember this. It's nothing. So why am I so bothered about it? And maybe I should just let it slide. But again, I must warn my more passive style communicators that if you're not careful, you can use that as an excuse to never give your opinion. And this is why I go back to saying that a good potential rule of thumb is maybe 60% where you don't and 40% where you do. And if you're honestly knowing that you're never really giving your opinion or giving it very much, then you need to work on that. You need to give your opinion more often. This world is a much better place with you in it. We've talked about this before. You are unique. There's no one on this planet like you. And although you may feel like your job where you're at today is so mundane that nobody would notice if you disappeared off the face of this earth, and the fact is that is further from the truth. And regardless of just your job, just the fact of what you do on day to day and who you talk to and who you interact with can change the world. We've talked about this butterfly effect. And therefore, this world is better off if you tell some things of what you feel, that you give your opinion. It really does make the world different. And in many ways, you are robbing the world. You are doing injustice in this world by not saying certain things in your life and backing away from ever giving your opinion. And on the other side, for my aggressive style communicators, you're doing injustice to the world by crowding out other people's opinion and always giving yours. Get a little breather in there and let other people have a chance to speak and let them differ with you and set up an environment where they are free to differ from you and don't try to change their mind. And this world is also better if you're not sneaking around trying to sabotage everything through a passive aggressive style. Again, going back to this assertiveness style, how much better it is that we can actually let people have their opinion and respect that, but also respect ours and not apologize for having an opinion. The author ends with a practice session, which I won't talk about since we are a lot of time right now in the episode, but it's called the Opinion Exchange, where you select an issue, and he gives several issues in his book. For example, is the internet a good thing? Or where is the best place to live in your country? Or who was your country's greatest leader or your poorest leader? And then to go through, usually with a partner, maybe just in front of a mirror, where you go through and practice your opinion about that. To present it in a very clear, neither passive nor aggressive style. It's not to change the other person's mind. It's not to get their approval. It's not to convince them that you are right. It's just simply stating what your opinion is. And then he provides a checklist that you go through and see, did you meet certain criteria when you were giving your opinion? For example, what was your body posture like, your movement, your eye contact, your facial expressions? What was your voice tone, your volume, your fluency? Did you apologize for your opinion? Did you focus on your own ignorance? Well, I don't really know, but, which is kind of a passive style. Did you dismiss other people's views? Like, no one but an idiot would think this way. Did you appeal to authority like research shows or experts agree that? And just different checklists like that. So if you have the book, I would definitely recommend that you go through that. If you don't have the book, well, I think I gave you enough details of this particular exercise that you could actually do it. So that's going to end this episode today. Now, next week, we are talking about how to receive positive feedback. Now, that may seem like a strange topic to cover because isn't positive feedback good? So why is there any problem with that? Well, it's amazing how we can't really handle positive feedback. The next 4 chapters in general are going to be talking about all types of feedback, whether we're giving feedback, whether we're receiving feedback, whether that feedback is negative. But we're going to start with positive feedback and talk about some of the issues that are there that are much trickier than what we may think. Some of the crazy things that we will do to block even positive feedback from coming to us, where we will downgrade ourselves and do things like that, even though people compliment us or do things like that. So I hope you'll come back. I hope you'll listen to this. I think it will prove for some very interesting discussion for us. And basically, we are about halfway through with this particular series. So we're going to talk about receiving positive feedback. We're going to talk about giving positive feedback. We're going to talk about receiving negative feedback, giving corrective feedback. We're going to talk about how do we say no to things? How can we make requests without controlling people? How do we deal with confrontation? How do we just be ourselves? So these are some of the topics that we're going to get into as we end up this series over assertiveness. As always, if you've enjoyed this show, if you've enjoyed this podcast, then please let me know. Please leave me a comment on my website, which is firstthingsproductivity.com/38. You can go all the way down to the very bottom. You can also leave me voicemail. I've had that up for several months now, and I haven't really heard from anyone of late. Although I did have a really kind reader leave me a voicemail to let me know that they had voted for me to be on Creative Live, and that is D. Ogantona. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. That's an abbreviation as well. But if you're listening to me, I've never said thank you for that. You left a voicemail for me. Thank you so much. That was about 2 months ago that you did that. But I very much appreciate that, and thanks for calling me and letting me know that you did that. But you can leave me a voicemail if you have questions or comments. Again, as I've always said, if you're afraid I'm going to play your voice over the podcast, you can just let me know at the beginning to say, Brandon, I want to ask you a question, but please don't play this on your podcast, and I won't. I won't do that at all. I love hearing from you, and I love letting other people hear your questions as well. But feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to leave me a rating or comment on iTunes. As always, on Stitcher, Zoom, BlackBerry, all the different areas that I'm at. Again, just helps people know about the show and trust the show. So until next time, remember this. Give your opinion, but don't give it all the time. Don't apologize for it. Don't be ashamed of it. And certainly don't try to change other people's opinion if they disagree with you. Have a nice conversation. Lay out why you feel the way you do. Don't feel like you have to justify your opinion. And just enjoy life. Enjoy people. Because in the end, that's all that it's really about. Embrace today with passion and intention. And don't die with your music still inside you.